أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا أبا القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين أرواحنا لتراب مقدمه الفداء وعجل الله تعالى فرجه وسهل مخرجه وجعلنا وإياكم من أنصاره وأصحابه والذابين والمستشهدين بين يديه بإذن الله تعالى أما بعد. Respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I sincerely pray you are all doing well and in the best of health and circumstances, and I welcome you to the series. As my dear brother Ihsan kindly mentioned, we'll go over a surface level, to be very honest and very clear with all of you. None can do justice in a one segment or even multiple segment series on the life, legacy, sacrifices, lessons, and ultimate bliss that are the members of the household of the Holy Prophet of Islam. Alayhum salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhim ajma'een. However, in the time that we have, in the moments that Allah has blessed us with, what better use of our time than to at least make an effort to go over some of the gems, pearls of wisdom, and if not, on a surface level, a synopsis of their biographic timeline. As you know, a biography is a chronological assessment of the events of an individual's life. And there are many ways people like to conduct a biography. Oftentimes you look at the birth of the individual is the most common. However, with more complicated people, it is more effective to look at the preceding events or the advent of the birth as well. Why? Because the birth, if it's no ordinary birth, then you must look at the circumstances leading to that birth. And you know very well that if there was anyone who had an extraordinary birth, it's none other than Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. That being said, this also applies to the death of the individual. So when you look at, once again, a biography, typically, usually, normally, you end it at the death. And in this instance, the shahada. However, with the individual you look at, depending on the kind of nature that you are dissecting and analyzing, if they don't stop at death and they continue leaving a long-standing impact, then you must look at their life post their death. Especially when you consider that as Muslims, we don't believe life ends at death. It continues, it proceeds. In fact, now life begins. وَإِنَّ الدَّارَ الْآخِرَةَ لَهِيَ الْحَيَوَانِ. That surely the afterlife, it's real living. So where does one even begin? I honestly don't know. Where can one even start? I honestly can't begin. However, like how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with even reward for the effort, you will never hit the bullseye, ever. Especially with those that are pure. And I am riddled with impurity and riddled with errors and riddled with flaws. How can I come and assess the flawless? How can I come and do justice? I cannot. But there is an effort that is commendable. Therefore, I find the relevancy personally in looking at and examining the lives of not just Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, but any member of the prophetic household. It is relevant to begin by first understanding them not as a person, but as an idea and concept. You see, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam isn't restricted to just those 63 years of his life, and he is limited to flesh and bone and blood, and that's him. Imam Ali, while he is prince of the believers, he's also the principal. While he is the Imam, he's also Imamah. That's why subtracting Imam Ali from the equation, his variable is so relevant, the entire equation falls. You know mathematics very well. There are certain variables that are extremely necessary. The entire process is not finished unless that's included. You look at big charts, big studies, and you see so many numbers and letters and numbers and letters. When they mix, it's like oil and water. What's happening? They can't get together. But it's so complicated that if one segment is removed from the entire equation, the whole thing collapses. Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib is so relevant, the dunya would collapse without him. He is so necessary, life would cease to exist. He is so pertinent and part and parcel to the societal fabric of not just Muslims, humanity, ya ammi, for goodness sake, that you can't just look at him as a person and say, just like you, just like this president, just like that hero, just like that person in history, Ali, I'm going to give you the same treatment. No, you can't. Because we could have done away with these people if they didn't exist. But Imam Ali is very much contingent on our existence as well. So he's not just an Imam, he's Imamah. That's why he is necessary in regards to our belief and foundations. Imamah, Usuluddin, it starts with him as well. Where do you want to begin? With his earthly creation or his spiritual creation? Because in the realm of spirits, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib has a story. We understand God took an oath. We took the oath in the presence of the Almighty. وَأَشْهَدَهُمْ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ قَالُوا بَلَى شَهِدْنَا that أَلْأَسْتُ بِرَبِّكُمْ قَالُوا بَلَى that God made a pact between us in the realm of spirits before the realm of the dunya. The exposition of this verse of the Holy Quran highlights to us that there was an interaction between us and the divine. Yes, Imam Ali plays a role there. So it really is challenging to say, and it's kind of laughable to be like, let's study the life of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib. You're trying to restrict now Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen. You have to be clear to the 63 years of his life. That's fine. But then how does one break down a lifestyle where he is not one character but multiple? He is Ali, the greatest thinker. Ali, the best warrior. Ali, the greatest leader of society. Ali, the most tender and soft among his people. Ali, the most compassionate and loving. Ali, the most brave and strong. Ali, the scariest to the kafir. Ali, the splendor to the eye of the worshipper. Ali, the closest to Allah after the Holy Prophet of Islam. Ali, the most God-centric thing to have ever existed, second to the Holy Quran and the Holy Prophet of Islam. Where do you even begin? That is why I will end this discussion now and go home, because there's no purpose. No, we want the thawab as well. So let's inshallah ta'ala begin with a very last salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Well, Ihsan got very nervous over there. He's like, no, we just started saying, don't leave. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, as you know, born in the 13th of Rajab, in the Gregorian calendar, you would see this as the 600th year of the Common Era. These are dates I believe are very relevant to know. 600, how hard is that? 600 in the Gregorian calendar, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen came to this world physically. Before this, 571, the Holy Prophet of Islam was born, making the Holy Prophet of Islam in his 30s when Imam Ali alayhi salam came into this dunya, about more specifically 30 years of age. The Messenger of God, the events preceding this are very unique. The Messenger of God in that Meccan society at the time was observant to the group of Arabs who already recognized God but had perverted the theology regarding God. So they added multiple deities, they believed in Allah but they had more gods. That's the society you're born in. And the society you are born in, or an individual is born in, shapes them. It affects them. Either they derail, and remember the word derail, particularly that wording, derail, or they become influenced by it. The term derail is relevant. Why? Because in Arabic, the equivalent would be to perform a version that is known as inhiraf. Inhiraf or a munharif, it is seen as a pejorative in the Arabic world today. If you call someone munharif, that means they are going against the grain, derailing, right? Whereas in the life of the Holy Prophet of Islam, in those early years of the message of Islam, it was a positive thing to be known as a munharif. How so? And those that followed that version of identity and theology were called the Hanifs. From the term munharif, Allah references in the Holy Quran, Millat Ibrahim al-Hanif. Al-Hanif is to mean that society went this way, you said no, I'm going to go that way. And that way is more logical and more sound. So the first members of the organization that followed God in a more monotheistic manner were called those who are ala millati Ibrahim Hanif. They are derailing of the majority on the path and theology of Abraham. In that circumstance, the Messenger of God understands that a relative of his, Abu Talib, and As-Sayyida Fatima bint Asad, are expecting a child. and they are due. This is the 600th year of the Common Era. Now the Prophet of Islam himself owed Abu Talib much, his uncle, for raising him, nourishing him, bringing him up and taking him into his care. As you know very well, the Prophet was born without his father in his life. He had passed away. Abdullah alayhi salam, in our theology, Abdullah is very much championed. Whereas in other non-Shia worldview, just so you know and for all of your information, he is condemned. For us, it's not the case. Then he was in the care of his mother until he was 6 years of age, As-Sayyida Amina bint Wahab. So she had left this world as well, once again an orphan, and then he was taken into the care of his grandfather, Abdul Muttalib, alayhi salam. Till he passed away, Abu Talib adopted him. Now, the tide has turned whereby Abu Talib is expecting a child. This would be his last, his youngest. Who here is the youngest of their siblings? I'm just curious. MashaAllah, MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Okay. You share something in common with Imam Ali, don't worry. That you and Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen are the youngest of the family. It is likely the case that they had Abu Talib and the Sayyidah Fatima, 6 children. Talib, hence Abu Talib. Historical reports indicate he vanished after the Battle of Badr. According to one opinion, it is probably the case he may have died. We're not sure. This is Imam Ali's oldest brother. Talib, you had Ja'far, you had Aqil. Then you had 2 sisters, one by the name of Hani or Jumana or Fakhita. Then you have the young Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen. Then Abu Talib is an old man at this point, and raising such a child would be burdensome definitely. Furthermore, while he was the custodian of the Kaaba and Masjid al-Haram, he was still very much a humble individual financially. So to raise a newborn child, I have a friend by the way, he mashallah got married and he's expecting to have a child, and he tells me, Sayyidina, I regret the child. Oh, you haven't had the kid and he's a regret? Why? He says, Sayyidina, do you know this economy, how difficult it is? Ajib. Just because of the economy status? You regret your ni'mah, your blessing? He's like, no, Sayyidina, I just started counting the budget. I'm already making ends meet with my wife. Now I have a mouth to feed. Baba, feed him like a banana, some baby food. How expensive is that? But it's like, no, I can't. It's difficult. Look at the length people are willing to go when they consider money as a factor. However, when you're someone like Abu Talib, he did not necessarily consider this as a burden, but it definitely is. Custodian of Kaaba, God-fearing individual. Back then, especially, one of the best ways to make money was to cheat others. Especially if you're in the business of caravan trade. The best thing to do is to add a bit more to the scale, How we gave you this much, and you add a bit more to that. Back in the day, I won't say which country, there were times when my family tells me that they would buy, for example, olive oil. And they would see by the end of the tank of olive oil they bought, at the very bottom of it, they found shaved pears and like potatoes in the bottom. So when they weighed this, they're like, oh, it's heavier than, it's much heavier, right? So they're like, but if they had minus that, we would have paid less. People cheat each other easy, especially if you get away with it. There are certain mu'minun, wallah, they would be millionaires today if they just a little bit cheated the system. But they know that rizq is in the hands of the Razzaq. It doesn't come from anywhere else. Why would you cheat Allah Azza wa Jal? Abu Talib is faced with this situation where now, don't judge people when they have kids, especially. However, he's in his late 70s and he's expecting a child. And the thing is, it's not his choice. It was Allah Azza wa Jal's choice. This is all part of Allah's divine plan and system. And we know Abu Talib alayhi salam, Imam Ali's dad, is a wali min awliya of Allah. A God-fearing, chosen individual. Now, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen is born and Rasulullah volunteers to raise him. In one way, it's him thanking Abu Talib for doing the same thing to him. Another way, it's to lift some of that burden from his beloved uncle, who pretty much adopted him and took care of him when he was little. That's why many ulama say, وَوَجَدَكَ ضَالًّا فَهَدَى in the surah of Duha. It is in reference to Abu Talib. Did he not find you stranded in some manner? وَجَدَكَ يَتِيمًا فَآوَى. Did he not find you orphaned and took care of you and took you in? Who did that other than Abu Talib himself? These are indirect references to this great individual, alayhi salam, who unfortunately 3/4 of the Muslim world vilifies him. He is condemned. For us, no. He is someone that is praiseworthy and championed. Abu Talib gives up his son to Rasulullah in the sense that Rasulullah raises him, nourishes him, tends to him, loves him and brings him up like his own child. He would feed him from the same hand that he ate. He would teach him from the lessons that he got taught by Allah Azza wa Jal, such that in the event known as Ghar Hara, when the first public revelations came down to man and womankind through the Holy Messenger of read in the name of your Lord who has created you, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen was present. He was with him. History doesn't necessarily emphasize this as it should be, but Imam Ali was with him in those incidences where the first moments of revelation came down. And then the hadith says that they heard فَسَمِعَ رَنَّةَ الشَّيْطَانِ. They heard the scream and wailing of the devil. To which Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen inquired, Ya Rasulullah, and what was that? He said, that was the scream of Iblis. He has now pretty much given up on all hope of misguiding all of humanity. For now the mission of Islam has publicly commenced. However, you hear what I hear, but you do not see what I see, for you are not a prophet after me. However, you are my successor. At the very beginning, in the commencement and the initiation of the religion of Islam, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen is ordained quite clearly, you are my successor. Upon this, the Prophet of Islam invites his family immediately. Come and embrace this new way that Shaitan is screaming his throat out for. And they all gathered. And the uncles were there. Abu Lahab is here. Abu Talib is there. Hamza bin Abdul Muttalib. Everyone is gathered. Abu Sufyan is there. These are the tribesmen, the peak of those society at the time. And they begin to take a mockery. In fact, when he calls them to come and embrace Islam, he wants to incentivize them. Oh, my tribesmen, my fellow family members, if you come and at least embrace, you will become the next successor. You will become the next to take charge after I leave this world. And none but the young hand of a 12-year-old Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib raises. He says, I will join you. Rasulullah said, Ya Ali, put your hand down for now. Let me announce it to everyone else. A second time, Imam Ali raises. A third time, Rasulullah says, I'm emphasizing, for the love of Allah, consider, embrace this way. You will become my successor after me. A third time, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen raises his blessed hand. So Rasulullah says, that's it. And he let it all be made clear. Holding that young hand, he held it not just in Ghadir Khum, he held it in the event known as calling of the family, Da'watul Ashira. He will be my successor, my wasli and the wazir after me. They began to laugh, and particularly at Abu Talib this time. What gives? Abu Jahl looks at Abu Talib and says to him, your son's going to lead you. And then it was a moment where confusion, slight pandemonium may have emerged, whereby it is clear that a 12-year-old will take charge of what seems to be aristocratic members of society. It was at that very moment that when we argue that he was announced the Khalifa of Rasulullah in the event of Ghadir Khum, you should take it back a lot more, a lot further. That it's in this moment where it was made publicly. And in the heavens it was already inscribed that there is no God but God. And that Rasulullah is his messenger, and that Ali ibn Abi Talib is his successor. This is one phase in the life of the holy Imam alayhi salam. Another phase is establishing his proof and the hujjah in his age of youth. You see, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, there are things the Messenger of God could do that Imam Ali can't do. But then there are also things Imam Ali could do, and I'm being very delicate with my words, that the Prophet technically couldn't do. Such as, the Prophet would get harassed and insulted by the members of society often. They called him names and they leveled accusations, Sahir, Majnoon, Kahin, left, right, and center. In fact, he began to even face physical abuse in the early years. Not yet assassination attempts, no, physical abuse, harassment. These were still people that were related to him, but they didn't tolerate his message that brought a risk to the economic status of this tribe, because at the end of the day, if you call for one God and they're buying and selling multiple gods, then it does take a risk and a toll upon them. But they would say, listen, let's not kill him yet. The killing comes later. In fact, they even decide to starve him. So at least they didn't kill him. They didn't just starve him to death, put an embargo upon them. In the Shi'ab of Abi Talib, eventually we'll discuss that later. However, they said that, you know what, let's deploy the young children to throw and cast stones at him. So what's unique about this? Because if the Prophet becomes angry or angered or retaliates in any way at us adults, then that's normal. That's an adult trying to bother another adult. But if a kid is subject to the Prophet's anger and annoyance, it doesn't look appropriate that a grown man is angry at little children, just throwing stones and bothering him, harassing him. There are certain people, they can't tolerate a fly coming near them. They begin to destroy everything. Now imagine here's a bunch of gangs of youth and they all throw stones. So the Prophet couldn't do anything. He really couldn't do much. It's not like he was doing much anyways in retaliation when the adults came to harass him and hurt him and harm him and chase him and persecute him. But it's justified if he does retaliate. But it's not justified much when you retaliate at little kids. That's why some of the worst conduct is when you see someone, even if a child is misbehaving, let's say at the center, running around, let's say somewhere where it may not be the most befitting that a child runs around and jumps around. You don't as an adult come and slap that child in front of people. That scars them. I remember hearing, and this might be a detour, but I remember hearing a story about Rasulullah and a young child who had basically urinated themselves in Masjid al-Nabawi, the holy mosque of the Prophet. The parent immediately yelled at that child, or in the hadith, hit the child. The Prophet said, as for the stain, water will purify it and clean it. But as for the fear you placed in his heart, what could clean that ever? It's okay. These are innocents, these are pure. So it's the worst to retaliate in such a manner, as an adult especially. This is a lesson we should learn. However, that law and rule doesn't apply on another child. A young Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen would come and defend Rasulullah. According to one tradition, he would actually stand between the Prophet and these kids, and they would run away when they saw a young Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib. I imagine he may have grabbed someone by the hair. I imagine he might have chased them all down. Like a young child versing at other children. No one will bat an eye and say, hey, there's an unevenness here. There's a discrepancy of authority here. It's just kids fighting kids. A young Imam Ali would come in and actually defend the Holy Prophet ﷺ from the other children to foil their silly plan of get the kids to bother the Messenger of God. That is why we say that there are moments the Prophet can't react, but the Imam can. It's in these kind of moments and incidences here. Really, through thick and thin, a backbone even in the most tumultuous of states. That being said, the Imam alayhi salam reaches a point in his relationship with the Messenger of God. As the first Muslim, the first Muslimah is Sayyidah Khadija, and he is raised in that holy household as well, such that the time came where they have to leave Mecca. 13 years, by the way, we just skipped 13 years. I mean, once again, surface level stuff. If you really want an appreciation of the biography of the Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, and an in-depth one, I highly encourage you to look further into literature such as, this has been translated into English by Sheikh Baqir Sharif Qarashi, his biography and his encyclopedia on the biographies of all the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, including Sayyidah Zahra and Rasulullah. Baqir Sharif Qarashi. It's been translated, it's online, it's available PDF. It might be academic English, but it's there with references and proper material. Surface level, however. It's a thought that counts. Give us some credit, yani. Give us a break. What can we do? Ali ibn Abi Talib, one word, needs a sharh and tafsir, as he was the one who on the minbar of Kufa, one hadith says, as Khalifa, he is sitting on the minbar and he is going over tafsir of the Holy Quran. He begins not with the chapter itself, but begins, let's start with the Basmalah, the Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let's give a tafsir for that before we jump in deep with the Holy Quran. And he begins on the letter Ba. What does the Ba, the B in Bismillah mean and reflect on an eschatological, Islamic, spiritual, mystical level? He is the one who says, I am the dot under the Ba, and that the holiest of verses, holiest of things is the Quran, the greatest of those is Fatiha, then the Bismillah, then the Ba, then the dot, and I am the dot under the Ba. Let me explain what that means. The hadith says he began in Fajr, he ended Maghrib, he was still on the Ba. And you want me to analyze Imam Hadi's life in a lecture? Why do this to me, Hassan? Why? Why? The depth, the comprehensiveness truly is something you can appreciate from a distance. To dive in completely will take a lifelong effort. Lives, actually. But in this moment and in this juncture, The Prophet has seen a lot of persecution. And the Imam himself doesn't shine yet. Because in the life of the Prophet of Islam, history, this is an interesting note to keep in mind. History does not record for us a single khutbah from Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib. A khutbah means a sermon. 23 odd years, 23, 24 years, 13 years in Mecca, 11 years in Medina. This was the message of Islam's duration. Not once does Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib deliver a khutbah. So what about Nahj al-Balagha? It's all sermons. Khutbat al-Muttaqeen, Shaqshaqiyya, this and that. That's all after Rasulullah died. The first of these was likely Shaqshaqiyya. Others of them have him in Badr, reflecting on the events of Badr. He has there's reflections that I didn't let out then. I let them out after the Prophet leaves. Why? One alim I saw give a beautiful interpretation to this reality that, listen, in the presence of your master, you don't talk until you are told to speak. In the presence of your teacher, you always give them precedent. Who are you to speak unless they let you? That's why there were moments the Prophet said, Ya Ali, you deliver this message. Ya Ali, you enter Mecca and say, we are coming now after years of persecution. We are coming in hundreds. And I deliver the surah of Tawbah. You come and explain this. Those were times the Prophet gave him moments. You come and speak publicly. But when the Prophet, the main Imam, is there, he would then speak. That's why the hadith, not the hadith necessarily, but an interpretation to these ahadith is that is why in the life of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, you never find a sermon by Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. Because how can I speak when my king and master is in front of me? Let him speak. The most I'll do is poetry, but what? Praising my master. La arhabul maut, nafsi, and all of these lovely lines of poetry that he says. Salamullahi ta'ala alayh. However, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen keeps to himself his explanations and expositions. Therefore, the time begins that he needs to now merge and leave Mecca, heading to Medina for literally shelter. That is all. Years of persecution, abandonment from society, inflicting upon them the embargo and sanctions, such that they had to retreat into what is known as the Valley of Abu Talib, owning a large land area outside of Mecca. Abu Talib said, this is the place I can give you because it's my personal property. As the mushrikeen have put sanctions upon the early handful of Muslims, none shall buy, none shall sell to them, allowed them literally to starve, and they kicked them out of their homes. 3 years went by. It was through the wealth of Sayyidah Khadija alayhi salam and the bravery of Imam Ali Amir al-Mu'mineen that he would take from this and sneak in night and go buy some food and bring it back as such. They leave. Before they leave, the Prophet says to Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, there is a task I need you to fulfill. This task may cost your life. However, as I leave, they will be stalking at night, and I need you to stay in my bed and sleep. This will divert attention from the mushrikeen, assuming that I'm still home, giving me and buying me more time to escape Mecca, heading to Medina. Afterwards, Ya Ali ibn Abi Talib, you are to go bring the 3 Fatimas, al-Fawatib. One of them, Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. Imam al-Mu'mineen is not married to her yet. One of them, Fatima bint Asad, his mom. One of them, according to one hadith, Fatima, the daughter of Hamza, his cousin as well. They stayed behind. It's dangerous. Take them afterwards. So he abandons him in this situation, however, telling him one thing. And if you do this, Ya Ali ibn Abi Talib, Islam will be saved. Not me, Islam will be saved. Imam Ali has to ask him, but Rasulullah, will you be saved? Are you going to be safe? He says, yes. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen goes to the room and he does sajdat al-shukr, saying 3 times, Alhamdulillah, al-shukru lillah, Alhamdulillah, I was chosen. He's 23 years old. I was chosen to give my life for my love and prophet and messenger. What an honor. Alhamdulillah. And he goes into that bed, but holding Dhul Fiqar as well. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen is there. The Prophet is able to retreat. The mushrikun, they all gather. When they enter upon the room of the Holy Prophet of Islam, this is when they give in and say, now we have to kill him. They take away the covers and they see Imam Ali basically looking at them. And I think in my mind, when I was told the story for the very first time, I was like, what's up? But what are you going to do? They said, where did he go? He says, don't even ask. The hadith says that in the heavens, Allah Azza wa Jal tells Mikael and Jibreel, the two angels. He tells Jibreel, Ya Jibreel, who is the most beloved to you in the heavens? Jibreel says, my brother Mikael. Allah says, Mikael, Michael, the angel, archangel, Michael, Mikael, who is the most beloved to you in the heavens? He says, my brother Jibreel. He says, would you be willing to give your life for him? He replies, no, not exactly, as much as I love him. Jibreel, would you be willing to give your life for your brother Mikael? You die so that he lives on? He says, no, Ya Allah, no. He says, then I want you to look down into this dunya. Look at Ali ibn Abi Talib, how he's willing to give his life, his future. He's 23 years, best life ahead of him for the message of Islam. But above that, he says, not even Islam, for Rasulullah himself. He is Islam. Why can't you be like him? The hadith says, the malaika became awe-inspired by Ali ibn Abi Talib's courage and bravery. That's true brotherhood. That's true loyalty. Upon leaving Mecca now, he brings his 3 family members. Now, I always think about this as well, that he brings his cousin, Fatima, the daughter of Hamza, according to one hadith. He brings his future wife, Fatima to Zahra, and he brings his mom, Fatima bint Asad. Who do you think you are chasing them to want to capture Imam Ali now? Or want to inflict pain upon these individuals here? You don't think he's going to flip the world over you? That's his mom. That's his future wife. That's his cousin. And even if they were his relatives, these are other Muslim women. You think Imam Ali is going to let you take them? These bandits of about 16 trail Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen heading from Mecca to Medina. And they say, Ya Ali, you have to return. He says, what are you going to do? This is my mom. That's the most important thing in my life. That's my future wife. That's my cousin. You want to fight? I will fight you till it's over. I don't even care anymore. No, it's game on. For anyone, if there are people that are with you don't really care about, you don't have that much passion. But if it's your mom with you, that's Ali's mom, bro. You gotta be half. That thing went out the window. They fought, and Sayyidah Zahra sees Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen get wounded for her sake. His mother sees him. But I believe they don't even have the slightest worry. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen gathers and meets the Messenger of God, who said, I can't proceed into Medina until Ali is with me. I will stay here in Quba, where they construct the first Masjid Quba, until they come. Those with the Holy Prophet of Islam, the handful, said, we're not going to wait. We can literally see Medina. You guys have been to Quba. If you go into Medina, you could see it's not far, Masjid Quba from Medina al-Munawwara. And so we're going to go. We can even see it. They left the Prophet of Islam because they couldn't believe how he would stay behind and wait for Ali ibn Abi Talib. He said specifically, I'm waiting for Ali ibn Abi Talib. Indeed, his daughter and his family, but Ali ibn Abi Talib, he has to come because we need to enter Medina together. They enter Medina al-Munawwara finally, and when they become welcomed by those in Medina, the Prophet saw that there was potential contention between Ahl Medina and between those who had migrated. And so the Prophet wanted to dissipate any problems that would emerge. You guys come from nowhere and you guys now need from us help, and you're a small number. Who do you guys think you are? And you're calling for a religion now? This is the same issues that led the early Meccans to go to war against the Prophet. Who do you guys think you are? So let's establish relations from now. This was called the Pact of Brotherhood, that he would choose a member from the Ansar of Medina to become like the brother of the Muhajir that had migrated from Mecca. And so he would select Abu Darda, you can come and become the brother of Salman al-Muhammadi. X from Medina, become the brother of Y from Mecca. You come here. Everyone got a brother except Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib. And they asked him, Ya Ali, who did you get assigned from the Ansar of Medina? No one. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen approaches Rasulullah. He says, Ya Rasulullah, what about me? He says, Ya Ali, anta akhi fi dunya wal akhirah. Ya Ali, you're my brother in this life and the next. You're the only exception. That when everyone got a pact of brotherhood treaty between the people of Medina and the members of Mecca, they had to be opposing Mecca, Medina. You're the only one where you're a muhajir can be brothers with me, a muhajir as well. You're the one exception. Not just that, in this life and the next, you are always going to be my brother. And that your example is like what the example of Aaron was to Moses. Brothers and prophets and the imams of their time and the leaders to be followed, one greater than the other, but nonetheless important in their status and relationship to Allah and to man and womankind. إِلَّا أَنَّهُ لَا نَبِيَّ مِن بَعْدِي, except that there will be no prophet after me. So you're the Imam after me, ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. They saw this lofty status that he had gained. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen weds Sayyidah Zahra alayhi salam. They live in Medina, of course, not without its wars. Badr, and you had Uhud, Khandaq, you had all these conflicts. And each one Imam Ali shines. That's why one of the writers of history tells us that Ali ibn Abi Talib, in battle, you were always exempt to run away from battle if you saw the sword Dhul Fiqar fighting on the opposition. Because if you don't see Dhul Fiqar fighting, running away would make you the biggest jaban and coward. You stand and die. I remember hearing in world history that the Spartan warriors, the mothers would say, don't return back unless on your shield. And that became an idiom, an expression, to highlight that when a warrior goes, they cannot return unless they're alive or on their shield. On their shield means they have large shields and they would carry them on the shield as such. When they return them, don't come back until you're on your shield. With Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, he made this the exception for all people who would fight Islam. That they say, listen, no one's going to blame you if you run away from him. Really, I mean, you'd be silly to fight him. I don't know what you're thinking. Dhul Fiqar is on that side. You think you can bring him down? How? You can run. Wallah, we won't call you scared. I swear you're not a coward. In fact, you're smart for not fighting him. You're the most intelligent person for not seeing Dhul Fiqar and thinking, let me face on. Who do you think you are? Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib confronts all of these, but in what is determined to be the least ethical circumstance, i.e. war, and you don't need to look further. Look at today's events of war. The least ethical place is war zones. Why hit schools? Why hit girls and children? Why hit bridges? Let people pass. No, we want to make sure they get a lesson. Why do all that? It's because ethics is lifted when it comes to war. Imam Ali is the most ethical in war. That makes him stand out. That makes him unique. In fact, dare I say, makes him bizarre. What warrior who he sees justification legally from the heavens to go and kill says, I'm going to consider benefit of doubt with them? He would say, if they decide to run away, khalas, just let them run. Don't chase them. His art of war, his lessons need to be studied thoroughly. It is why someone like Muslim bin Aqil, who is in the house of Hani bin Urwa, when he is told, come and fight, come and assassinate Ibn Ziyad, he's here, he's least expecting you, you're hiding behind the curtain, upon which Ibn Ziyad leaves. He says, I gave you the signal to jump out. He says, I was trained by Ali ibn Abi Talib. You can never attack someone who's not facing you. History will record me as someone like an assassin. And that's easy to do. The biggest jaban is the assassin. The biggest coward is the one who says, I can't confront you face to face, so I'll poison your water. I'll jump at you from behind. He says, that's not how I was trained by Ali ibn Abi Talib. The ethics of war, none come near. That in the battle of you know very well, of Khandaq, of Ahzab, that giant Amr ibn Wad al-Amiri approaches and they fight. When the confrontation happens, Rasulullah, as he sees Imam Ali leave to face him, he says, all of Iman has now faced all of shirk and kufr. Baraz al-Iman kullah, ila shirki kullah. Imam Ali became the embodiment of faith. That's why you are faithless without Ali ibn Abi Talib. What are you except Daesh, Ma'ish, Boko Haram? These people, they removed the Ali variable and they became monsters. They became terrorists. What are you if you say ethics doesn't exist even in war? Oh, in that case, why? Because they don't have a role model like Ali ibn Abi Talib. They don't have the archetype of ethics even in what seems to be the apparent lack of ethics. The vacancy of morality and human decency and dignity should still be reserved even in the place where justification exists to spill blood. Not Ali ibn Abi Talib. He sees this man and he says to him, listen, I'm going to face you for the sake of Allah. He says, but I won't fight you because your dad was a friend of mine, Abu Talib. He says, but I will fight you because you're the enemy of Allah. There is no family relation now. It drops when it comes to haqq. Many people, they fold. That's my dad's friend. This guy, we knew him from the past. Give him some slack. Let him in. Give them more. be disproportionate in society and favor nepotism and those that were near to you. Not when it comes to the truth. I will face you because you are an enemy of Allah. And they fought. When the battle finished, you know very well, the Imam waited a moment before he struck him the final blow. Upon asking why was that the case, he said, listen, he insulted me. He spat at my face and I got angry. As a human being, I get angry and I get happy and I laugh and I get mad. These are emotions that are inalienable to every insan. At that moment, I got angry. It's not a flaw because he spat at me right before I was about to deal a blow to him. And an Arab that acts like this is beneath them. You're a brave warrior. How dare you spat? How could you do that? So I waited to calm down, to end his life, because I wanted to make sure that I operate because of my sincerity of trying to do what God wanted me to do. He had angered Allah. That is why I end him. I'm not going to end him because he angered me. I want to make sure my niyyah is always clean. Amazing, impeccable. His sister, Amr ibn Awid's sister, comes to her body, her brother's body, begins to mourn and cry. And then she says, I want to see the killer. They bring Imam ʿAlī and she says, thank you so much. They are perplexed, of course. What are you thanking him for? She says, it's an honor that my brother dies by the hands of someone as noble as you. She says, how? He, my brother, whenever he would fight, he would at least bring a disclaimer. Yes, I might be the strongest warrior there was. The size of a bear, basically. However, if you happen to kill me, a cheap shot here, I slip there, if I die, I have jewelry on me that belongs as inheritance. It was passed down. Don't take it as spoils of war. Let it go back to my family. The fact I come over my brother's body and I see jewelry still on him means you never took a single thing. You honored his dying wish even though he was here to fight you. Ethics still exists. That you are still trustworthy and noble. And how can't he be if he is the product, the fruit, the produce, the contribution of As-Sadiq Al-Amin Rasulullah, the most trustworthy and most honorable, the Prophet of Islam. That's why Rasulullah says, that's why I call him all of Iman. That's why he is all of faith. Because he doesn't relinquish his faith in moments where no one would blame him for going mad, going berserk, blitzkrieg, angry, yalla fight, emotions. La, maintain composure, maintain demeanor. That's why years later when Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen is teaching his sons the same thing. If you read Nahj al-Balagha, his speech to his son, Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah, is, Ya Muhammad, when you go to face the opposition in the battle of Siffin, I need you to not look at the first rank, look at the last. Your goal is the end, not the beginning. His arts of war. He says, peg your feet into the earth. Make them anchored like mountains, unshakable. Grit your teeth. Interesting pieces of advice by the Amir. That you are remembering, listen, you have to be forbearance, robust. Look at the last of them, not the forefront. Make sure you grit your teeth. Anchor your feet into the earth. Ya Muhammad, in this context, if they run, don't chase them. If they call out in the belief of Allah, khalas, they're Muslims, you can't kill them. If amongst them are elderly, you cannot fight them. Women, leave them alone. Children, don't approach them. A church you run into, don't demolish it. A temple, leave it alone. Any form of synagogue, you can't do that. So the Quran says it. If they have trees between you and them, cannot chop down the trees. Animals like horses, no, you can't touch that. He brings multiple dimensions of the arts and ethics of war in a place where people say, you know what, who cares? Let children die. The most disgusting, the most degrading moment in time in the human timeline is when people say, you know what, let the children die. Monsters. We've seen it in the last 3-4 years as well. Do you know why? I'm not going to say that it's because they removed the Imam ʿAlī variable. La, I wish it was just that. They removed the God variable. These people, they don't believe in God. Of course, we don't believe in God. You don't think you're going to be held accountable. You just do whatever you want. You know what's worse? I even meet you halfway. It's okay. Don't believe in God. Just don't call yourself God. And think whatever you do is the truth. That you're justified. You worship yourself. That you party on some island. Human trafficking. That you don't care except of your carnal desires. You're an animal, but I disrespected animals by calling you that. Because nothing degrades degeneracy. Degrades rather a human's life into the form of degeneracy that we see today, except when people begin worshipping themselves and relinquish God, and furthermore relinquish God's burdens and proofs upon you, His proofs on earth. decency. You know, many people will say, do I need religion to become a good human being? I don't need that. Obviously, murder is wrong. You don't need God to tell me that. Obviously, cheating others is wrong. I don't need to be told that by God. I would agree with you until I saw Epstein's Island. You would think these things are not things that need to be taught at a church, at a school. But I mean, obviously murdering a baby is wrong. I don't believe that anymore with what's going on here. I don't believe society believes that anymore. When people say, do I need God to be a good human being on earth? Apparently you do. Because we forgot common sense. Because when people justify the murder of children, killing innocents, breaking desalination is when they purify water to give to people, poor people. Destroying those sites. Why? How comes? You have issues with government, you can deal with diplomacy. You want to go to war with children? That means you're godless. And you need to be attending Dar al-Hikmah's classes about Islam on every Sunday to learn your alif ba ta tha of Islam. Islam 101 apparently. Yes, you need religion to be able to understand the obvious again. Because the obvious, as a wise man once said, common sense is not so common. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, throughout that tenure of the prophetic life, exemplifying the most amazing and impeccable virtues and qualities, as you saw in the battles such as Khandaq and others. The battle of Badr, half the opposition he wiped out. Of course, where do I begin? On the battle of Khaybar? Where do I begin on Hunayn? Where do I begin on Hawazin? Where do you even begin? That's why in this juncture I encourage all of you to please go in your own effort, learn from the life and legacy of this Imam alayhi salam. I would like to enter our conclusions with some reflections on the martyrdom of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen. As you all know, having finished with Shahr Ramadan, there was that time period where we honor the Imam alayhi salam as we do daily, but with emphasis on these nights of Qadr. Are we good with time? Mr. Brother Ihsan, are we good with time? 5, inshallah. Those were the days that we honored the Imam with emphasis on his masab and his martyrdom. In those days, I'd like to reflect something with all of you. Yes, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib's life is too deep, and you need many levels, many seasons, many libraries to even scratch the surface. However, his life could be summarized in one word. Lam. No. Imam Ali alayhi salam says no, and that's what made him astonishing. Imam Ali alayhi salam never conforms to a society that said yes all the time. Even when he saw his own brethren making error, he said no. He saw the Christian begging for help. He said, Ma haba. They said, Innahu Masihi. He said, I never said men. I said, Ma haba. I never asked who. I said, what? I see oppression. I see injustice. No to injustice. When he was put in the position where he had to observe magnanimity, and he sees Ibn Muljim begging, pretty much crying his eyes out, he says, how is it the case? He is tied so tightly. Unleash the ties from his hand, even though he's my killer. Unleash them. I can't bear to see a horse suffering, let alone a fellow human being. Fellow human being. It doesn't degrade his humanity. He's still a human at the end of the day. Give him from my clothes, give him from my food, give him water that I am drinking from as well. If I die, then deal with him the same way he dealt with me. If I survive, I will know what to do with him. The degree to say no when you could lash out summarizes the Imam's life. Society goes this way, wherever Imam Ali goes, you go that way. Even if it means you have to say la. La to injustice. No to oppression. No to a degree of praise and pride that you feel you've made it, you feel you've accomplished, and yet he still says, اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء. Forgive me of the sins that hold back my du'as. Summarize his life in a form of no to oppression and always yes to the Almighty and His ultimate justice. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina Muhammadin wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us ziyarah of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen in this dunya, to give us a shafa'ah in the akhirah. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to help all those who are dealing with injustice and oppression, Ya Allah. We ask you, Ya Allah, بحق أمير المؤمنين شافي مرضانا اقضي حوائجنا فرج عنا عجل لوليك الفرج. And for the arwah of the shuhada, the ulama, those who have left us, For those who have no one to remember them, let us give them a surah al-Mubarakat al-Fatiha. But before the loudest of your salawat.